dollar sports business, news, marketing, deal making, a whole host of issues. It is rare that you have someone who can transform sports, wellness, entrepreneurialism, lifestyle, whole bunch of stuff, obviously a great pedigree, but without further ado, understanding that the key to the business is also how you deal around it, and from the media perspective as well. Gotham Chopra, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit about the venture, about the process, and kind of where are you and why is what you offer so unique?
Sure. So the company is called Religion of Sports, and, it originally started as a series, a television series that continues. It's actually about to launch our third season on Audience Network. The sort of vision was always, why sports matter. And I've been a huge lifelong sports fan. I grew up in Boston, so, Patriots, Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics, etc. Passionate sports fan, but I also grew up around my father, Deepak Chopra, and the wellness and spirituality industry, so to speak. And so I always kind of felt, everything that my father spoke about and I was exposed to in that industry and in that life, I was experiencing sports and I just loved it. And sports is, to me, a religion. It's a community of people with whom you share, values and passions and all of that. So the show kind of stemmed out of that. We, do 6 original hours every year in terms of just exploring different sports communities all around the planet and why sports matter. And then over time, over the last 2 years, we've really expanded it from just being a television series to somewhat of a production engine. We produce other shows for Facebook and Showtime. I work with athletes like Tom Brady and LeBron James. Both Tom Brady and Michael Strahan are partners, not only in the original show, but now in the broader business. And that's kind of where we are. We just recently launched a podcast. And, yeah, but it's the same fundamental DNA, which is, why sports matter and really tapping into those passions and understanding why people sometimes have an irrational, connection to sports, whether you're an athlete or a fan.
There's another perspective to it, clearly. Gotham Chopra is with us today. It's the doing great by doing good. We know that philanthropy has increased about 12% in the annual evaluation of the relative pieces of the sports business. And when I talk to a lot of the CEOs on my Power of Sports stuff on Fox and otherwise, it's, clearly doing the right thing. But there is now a conscious tie that branding, philanthropy, giving the right charitable orientation can increase your ROI as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I think just, we live in some pretty crazy times right now. And, we're very polarized in this country politically and otherwise. And so sports is one of the places in which oftentimes, even though there's been a history of sports and politics mingling as well. But, in general, sports is a place, at least for those 3-4 hours during a game, that communities can come together despite their many differences. And I think a lot of people recognize that. A lot of brands recognize that. Sports are very sort of integrated at the local level into their communities with youth groups and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of goodwill in this industry. Look, like you opened, you said $1 trillion industry. I mean, there's a lot of money, and sports rights are one of the last places in the television business where you're continuing to see growth. Everyone else has moved into the on-demand business, but I think there's a lot of great energy and goodwill, and that's something that deserves more focus.
Energy and goodwill is sometimes hard to quantify, but yet really, really important. From your dad's perspective, obviously yours too, and your partners, you hear a lot of hue and cry in the traditional punditry that athletes are not role models, or they choose to pick athletes that are, because of their behavior, not role models, and blow it, some would say, out of proportion. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, my take is athletes are human beings, and oftentimes in the news we focus on the ones who have had problems, et cetera. But the vast majority of professional athletes, certainly collegiate athletes, et cetera, are good people and are doing great work. That doesn't mean they're perfect. And I think that, there's also been a history of great, Bill Russell, I just finished a series called Shut Up and Dribble, which is on Showtime. And then that we track, athletes who have been activists. And so Bill Russell is an example of somebody who, arguably is the most dominant player in the history of professional basketball, but it was also a civil rights activist at the same time. And so I think, and today you see, LeBron James, who's probably the best player of his generation for sure, and he's outspoken. And that's not to say that, there's other people who aren't, more engaged in their communities and making a huge difference, but it does matter when people of a certain profile provide a platform for others. And so I think, that's one of the great things about certain athletes, and again, something that should be recognized and celebrated, and not to diminish, some of the tremendous problems that do exist in the industry, but, I don't think it's a either-or situation.
Business show, business perspective, I know you share some of this as well. Every athlete seemingly has a foundation. Some do it right, some do it wrong. Some take too much money for administration. Some give to the wrong causes. Some expose the foundations to higher liability than otherwise, and on and on and on. What's your kind of surefire, proven, experiential set of business tips on doing the right thing through creating foundations?
Yeah, it's a tricky question, and I think, so much of these guys have so much going on in their lives, and so it's easy to sort of fall into some of the traps that, come with that because you just lose attention. I think, it's the analogy between sports and the rest of life, I think, is often, very helpful, and it's surrounding yourself with a great team and choosing the right people, because you can't, be on top of every single thing all at the same time. So it's really, if your weakness on your basketball team is a three-point shot, then you go get three-point shooters. If you're starting a foundation or a philanthropic endeavor, then go find people with the experience and the credibility and the track record who have done that successfully. So, I very much believe it's the same thing in my business. I'm a filmmaker, a storyteller, and it's not all about me. It's surrounding myself with the right editors and writers and producers and all of that. And so, I think it's building the team, having, and keeping it tight and being efficient.
Gotham Chopra, specifically, talk about kind of your world as a filmmaker and how you feel about your obligation/opportunity, two different thoughts, of increasing the visibility of doing good, changing the world, affecting the world through sports.
Yeah, so, my business and industry it's the media, and I'd say it's, even beyond sports, is undergoing enormous transformation, just, the advancement of technology, social media, it's just so different than it was, say, 10, 20 years ago in terms of distribution, even production, cameras, et cetera. So, but at the heart of it, there's still storytelling, the ability to tell good stories. And there's a certain formula to that requires, training and savvy and stuff like that. So I think that's the opportunity in terms of what's out there. I think obligation, it's an interesting thing. It's like I've grown up, this goes back to my other part of my life, the spirituality, the world of spirituality. It's about service. And, I was taught from a very young age is, what are you contributing? What are you putting out into the world? And so that's always sort of been the DNA, and I think we've tried to bring it to this company. Look, we're a for-profit company, and we're trying to sort of build, and, I've got great supporters and investors and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, the sort of soul of the company is about telling stories that matter and showing and, empowering, inspiring. Again, that doesn't mean everything is just sort of, blue sky, but, we try to sort of find stories that, are transformative and that inspire people. And, why I love sports is because it's about human potential. It's mythical. It's about being the best version of ourselves. And so those are the types of story that we, try to tell and the audience that we're trying to connect with.
All right, understanding that this is maybe a little evergreen, so this might not be aired this week, so we'll have a chance to validate and verify the following. Are the Patriots going to win another Super Bowl?
man, it's tough right now. But, Patriots have a history of sort of dealing with adversity, and Tom is a good friend. And so I have a lot of confidence in him. We've seen this past week when they got beaten pretty bad by the Titans. But, it wasn't so great. But, I feel good. I always feel good with this guy.
Right. Do you lend a calming spiritual influence to the sports teams that you care about? Do you make them play better just by being around you?
I would like to think so, but there's a part of me that's pretty in touch with my primordial self. You might not want to see me, during the World Series a couple weeks ago, or actually against that ALCS against the Astros. I can get pretty tense, tribal, I would say.
Well, listen, one good thing about Gotham Chopra is obviously a world of unique experience, but he knows his limitations, and he probably can't hit a curveball, and he certainly can't hit Chris Sale. Rick Horrow, speak with you soon.